Shalom and welcome to Jewish Voice, where we help you to discover the Jewish roots of your Christian faith. I'm Jonathan Bernis. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to explore compelling evidence for the supernatural with some people who have experienced it firsthand. What do the scriptures really say about miraculous events that defy explanation? It's a fascinating subject and one I examine in my new book, A Rabbi Looks at the Supernatural. More about how I met Yeshua in a minute, because I'm not the only one who had a supernatural encounter with Yeshua. Let me introduce our first guest. He's Rabbi Eric Tokajer, and I want to welcome him to the program. A longtime friend.
It's great to be here.
And ministry partner. I love having other Jewish believers on the program because we all have similar testimonies. We were raised told that Jesus was the God of Christianity, us and them, and then we had a supernatural experience in some way, shape, or form that brought us into this great relationship. But like me, you prepared for your bar mitzvah.
Correct.
You entered into adulthood at age 13 when you read from the Torah. And then what became of your Judaism? What was your view of Judaism?
Well, my family was very active in the synagogue, and after my bar mitzvah, up until your bar mitzvah, you pretty well learn how to be Jewish and how to say the traditional prayers and how to read Hebrew and the history of the Jewish people and primarily on the Holocaust and things like that. Then after your bar mitzvah, you actually begin to study the scriptures in Hebrew high school or yeshiva or something above that where you actually start breaking into the word. And when I did, I started reading things, for instance, in Leviticus, where it said there had to be a sacrifice every year to cover the sins of Israel. And yet there wasn't a sacrifice happening anymore. So I began to ask the rabbis, my rabbi and then other rabbis as time went on, the question, how are Israel's sins covered?
Let me stop there for a second because this is so critical. It's really important to understand that concept has been all but eliminated from Jewish faith, that you need a temple,
Absolutely.
That you need a sacrificial system, when in fact that's why Yeshua shed his blood, to fulfill the sacrificial system.
Exactly. So at that point, I started looking around, looking at more scripture, finding things that really confused me more than anything else, made me question, and I became agnostic. And I was 17 and I joined the Navy, and in Millington, Tennessee, on the base that I was at, they were playing Christmas music all over the base. Well, that offended me. Even though I was an agnostic Jew and I really wasn't practicing, I didn't want to listen to what I considered Christian music everywhere I went. So I put in a request to have it stopped on the base, and it was. As a result of that, the people in my unit got upset about it, and they gave me what's known as a blanket party, which is where they basically throw a blanket over your head and everybody beats on you. After that took place...
One person didn't participate.
Right. After that took
Why?
place, a young man named Scott, who's still a friend of mine today, came up to me and said, I didn't participate and I want you to know. And I asked why. He said, because I'm a Christian. And I responded to him by saying, what difference does that make? Christians have been killing Jews for 2,000 years. And so that led up to him asking me for 9 months. We went through Bible study. And at the end of 9 months, we'd moved from Millington to Pensacola. He was going to a church. And he invited me to come to a Bible study. And at the Bible study, we were sitting down together. There were about 100 people there. And the Bible study teacher said, turn to 1 John chapter 14, verse 7. And then he immediately said, turn to Corinthians or Galatians, one of those books. I'm not sure which one because I didn't know any of them at the time. And so I elbowed my buddy and I said, what are we doing here? This guy doesn't even know what he's doing. Tell us to read this, do that, and doesn't even talk about it. And he said, well, maybe that was for you. And he handed me the Bible. And it was the verse that said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. How show us the Father. And the whole interaction between Yeshua and his disciples saying he and the Father are one, which was the last question I had in becoming a believer.
So you had a supernatural experience in that Bible study.
Absolutely. And that night I became a believer.
Powerful. Bible study changed my life as well. God is a supernatural working God. You think there's supernatural power in every verse of the Scripture?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. The thing is that each verse is supernatural. Each verse is God-breathed. But it depends on where we're looking at it, how we're looking at it to see that. You can read the same verse over and over, and then one day it kind of comes alive to you. And that's the moment that I believe God speaks to you supernaturally through that verse.
Powerful. And he's been speaking to you for the last 33 plus years.
Absolutely. Almost 35 now.
Since 1981. What a beautiful testimony.
It's a blessing.
Supernatural testimony. Thank you, Rabbi Eric. Today we're talking about the supernatural, and it's because hot off the press, and I literally mean this, it just came out, my newest book, A Rabbi Looks at the Supernatural, and we're looking today at how God uses the supernatural to get our attention. Our next guest is a world-class musician who once pursued earthly fame and fortune, but now he's after heavenly treasure. Meet Rodrigo Rodriguez. Welcome back, Rodrigo.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I think you have the best stage name in the world, Rodrigo Rodriguez.
You have to roll the R's.
You do, and I love that. I learned that from Ruffles Have Ridges. So Rodrigo Rodriguez. I love the name. More importantly, I love you, and I love the wonderful gift that God has given you. Now, I've never interviewed you before, but you have a fascinating testimony. You grew up in Ecuador, and you recorded your first album at age 12.
Yes.
Right? Wow. How do you do that at age 12? But your family wasn't religious. Talk about your upbringing.
You know, I grew up in a non-religious environment, going to churches on Easter and Christmas. So I grew up thinking that God was a man's invention. Everything was God for me, the moon, the stars.
So then let's fast forward to about 23 years ago. You're in your late 30s, and a friend invites you to church.
This friend was my agent, this guy in charge of my music business.
So you had to go.
Well,
if you wanted gigs, you had to go.
Well, you know, I was refusing in the beginning. I told this guy, listen, you are my agent. You are in charge of my music. I don't need nothing else. Guitar is my all I need. So if God works for you, good for you. But, you know, just leave me alone. And this guy said, Rodrigo, if you go with me to church one time, I will stop to telling you about God. So I was thinking, if I go with this crazy man for an hour, then he's going to leave me alone. And I went to Costa Mesa Calvary Chapel, Pastor Chuck Smith, an amazing teacher. Everything that Chuck spoke that day came to my heart in an amazing way. And I understood the gospel the way how I should.
So did you accept the Lord that day?
No, not that day, but the next Sunday I went by myself.
Ah, you went back, huh?
And the next Sunday, I think after 3 weeks, when Chuck did an altar calling, I get up and I came and said, God, I'm here.
You had a supernatural moment with the Lord, though, that changed everything.
Yeah, I was playing First Baptist Church in Sarasota, Florida. And usually when I play the guitar, I close my eyes. And it's not necessarily to show the people that I can play with my eyes closed, I was playing Shout to the Lord. By the way, Shout to the Lord is the first song that I arranged of sacred music or Christian music, however you want to call. And I was playing Shout to the Lord, closing my eyes, and I hear this amazing choir, 4-parts choir, singing Shout to the Lord. So I was smiling. I was thinking, man, these people know how to sing. Probably all the congregation, they sing in the choir of this church. And it was the perfect harmony. And I opened my eyes to give them an acceptance. And I opened my eyes and everybody was quiet. Nobody was moving their lips. And that was a time with never happened again, I tell you. But this is like the Lord saying, Rodrigo, I like your music, but more I like than your music, I like the sense of your music, who you are playing to.
Now, you're in for a treat. This master guitarist is going to perform the song that triggered a heavenly chorus. I have to tell you, I didn't hear any choir singing, but I did just hear heavenly music. Thank you, Rodrigo. Stay with us while I take some questions from our audience.
It's time now for Ask the Rabbi.
Okay, we have some questions now from our studio audience. Stand up, tell us your name and your question.
Yes, Jonathan, my name is Carolyn, and I am just wondering why God uses supernatural means to reach just some of us and not all of us.
Carolyn, that's a great question, and this is my response. I think God deals with all of us supernaturally. I just think it's more evident just in some cases. When I talk about supernatural, God orchestrating people, events, opening our heart to when it's been closed, like with Rodrigo and in my testimony, to the point where we heard the truth and our heart was ready to respond. Maybe not our mind, but our heart, because with the heart one believes. And looking back, hindsight, they say, is 20/20. And as I look back and think of how all of these events were orchestrated leading up to that Bible study I went to 36 years ago, rather, that's supernatural. So I believe that God is dealing with us supernaturally, and we need eyes to see. Sometimes they're common events, sometimes they're extraordinary, but they're supernatural. One more question. Stand up, tell us your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Nan, and I'd like to know, do you think that supernatural phenomena occur as much today as they did in biblical times?
That's a really good question, too. And as one who travels around the world, and particularly spends a lot of time in places like Africa and India and developing nations, I would say it depends. The answer is yes, by the way, but it depends where. In the Western world, America and Europe, we aren't as open to miracles, and we aren't in need of miracles. We have a doctor emergency room at our fingertips. In 5 minutes, we can be there. But in places like India and Ethiopia, in the bush of Zimbabwe, they have to rely on a supernatural healing, and their worldview is more open than ours to the supernatural, which answers a question you didn't ask. Why is there so many more healings outside of America, of Canada, the United States, Europe? It's because of an openness to the supernatural realm, and I'm hoping to see more miracles here in the United States and in Europe. Thanks for your questions, and if any of you have a question for us, you just go to jvmi.tv and you click on Ask the Rabbi, and who knows, maybe your question will be used.